Greetings, friends, fellow Earthlings, and explorers of worlds near and far, and welcome to Ask an Astrobiologist, the show that celebrates the science and the scientists involved in our quest to understand the nature of life. As usual, brought to you by SaganNet.org and the NASA Astrobiology program, and I am your host, Dr. Graham Lau, also known online as the Cosmobiologist. A huge thank you to all of you, as always, who watch the show, share about the show, join us in the chat on the YouTube Live, who share about our guests, and just engage all together in all of these questions we have about the nature of life in the universe. Every month, we like to highlight at least one person who's been engaging with our polls and our questions and commenting and sharing online. And so this month, we want to say a special shout out to Intrepid Nerd 3599 on YouTube for answering our question about our guest this month and just for being really awesome and involved with our show. Now, our guest for today is one I've wanted to have on the show for quite some time, especially since reading this recent book. Today we have Dr. Nathalie Cabrol joining us. She is the director of the Carl Sagan Center at the SETI Institute. She researches topics in the realms of habitability and life on Earth and high environment lakes and lacustrine environments and ancient Mars. She's worked in developing science exploration strategies for NASA and designing field tests using robots and other tools in the field. She's led various projects in planetary science and astrobiology. She's written several hundred peer-reviewed publications and conference proceedings and has several books out, including The Secret Life of the Universe. She also holds the women's world record for free and scuba diving at altitude, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And so please help me in welcoming to the show Dr. Nathalie Cabrol. Nathalie, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Graham. Really pleased to be here.
I'm so stoked to have you on the show. I've wanted you on for some time. I'm glad it's with serendipity. It always is to have people on the show when they have new books out and new things happening. As always with my guests, though, when I first bring them into the show, one of the big questions we have, especially since a lot of people watching this show want to be involved in astrobiology in various ways, sometimes as a career or just as a passion. And so I'd love to know from our guests what your science origin story was. What got you interested in science, astronomy, astrobiology, planetary science? What was the thing that started you down this pathway?
Well, it's really strange because, I was born in France, and there is a cartoon over there that probably Asterix and Obelix. So think about Obelisk. I cannot explain it, but I fell into the cauldron when I was little. It was been baited, I always wanted to do that. I can't explain it. I was just watching the star very, very young. And then it happened. Didn't help that I grew up at a time where you had people like Carl Sagan and Jacques Cousteau, on the screen everywhere. So maybe there is a little bit of something about me trying to figure out life in the universe by diving into high lakes.
That's awesome. I mean, I think a lot of our guests we've had on the show have been scuba divers and involved in water in some way. So like water is a huge drive for those of us who want to know life. A lot of us have looked at the stars or read science fiction or been inspired by media. And so it's a big thing. Now your graduate research and your entry into this realm of planetary science and astrobiology started when you were doing your master's and your PhD, and you were working primarily with Viking data, I understand, and looking at ancient watery environments on Mars. What transitioned you to get interested in looking at Mars as a topic of study?
Well, I guess, Mars was really the planet where we had the most data after Viking. I mean, Voyager was cruising through the solar system, so we had some really nice shots, and we're still working on some of those images. Galileo came a little bit later, and so Mars was really the thing where we had two landers on the ground in 76, 77, and we had the two orbiters and a vast quantity of images. Mariner 9 also had started that. So if you wanted to do planetary science, which was still a little bit of a fringe discipline when, especially in France, because I was still there then, this was your entry into planetary geology.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so as I understand it, you were very instrumental in choosing Gusev Crater as a landing site for one of the Mars exploration rovers, Spirit. Leading up to this, we had talked online, and I mentioned that in 2007, when I worked as an intern at NASA Ames, that Dave Demaray, who I was working in his lab, was leaving that summer to do science operations for Spirit. You were involved that summer in science operations for Spirit, and we found so much of the Mars exploration rovers, and it changed a lot of our knowledge from Viking. Once we had Mars Global Surveyor and we had these other missions come up, including the Mars exploration rovers, we started getting so much more data. And I wonder, from your perspective, not only looking back at your early research using Viking data, but then being involved in Spirit and science operations, and now seeing this next evolution of rovers, what your vision is for how we've changed our exploration of Mars through time.
What was wonderful with the Mars exploration rover missions, for me, it was an incredible adventure because really Gusev was the thing that I was working on. I had been working for Gusev for 15 years when I got it finally selected as a landing site for Spirit with my husband. And so what was wonderful about it was that for all these years, we'd been peering over all this data from orbit. And then you are here and you are waiting to hear from a rover that just landed on Mars, and for the first time in 15 years, all of a sudden you see that place from the ground. And that's a unique moment, that I wish to all of those who are doing what we're doing, because this is really what it is about. It is about exploration, about knowledge, about discovery. And we had to write everything. I mean, yes, Pathfinder was there maybe, I don't know, 7 years before that, but it was a shoe size box kind of thing. And it was really not ready for big exploration. It was there as a technology demonstration. So we had to literally write the book on how human talk to rovers, they interact with them, they do science and exploration with them, because for the first time in human history, you are not singing the ship, or you are not on a horse yourself in the field. You are delegating what you want to do and what you want to learn to a machine. And so, oh my God, so I had the chance to have our landing site picked. That was really a first thing that made me so happy. And then I got selected in the team, which means that I had to go to JPL a few weeks later with the rest of the people who had been selected. And now we're on the high bay. And the first thing I see is the shield, the heat shield. And Spirit is still looking like a little pile of, metal. You already can see the wheels, etc. But here's the windshield, the heat shield, and you have engineers tying knots. And there is one guy in whole bunny suit and everything tying knots. And there is another one looking over his shoulder. And there is a third one looking over his shoulder. And now you understand the precision of what's going on there and why it is so important. Because if that thing fails, like any of the 200 failing point that there were on that mission, there is no mission. And so then it struck me that the next time I would see that thing, if I could see it ever again, would be at Gusev. And we ended up seeing it. We captured it on the Bonneville crater. And then there was the first dry run. We're at JPL, and then we are trying to talk to each other. We are trying to rehearse that, day in team work. And we soak so badly. Well, I mean, we were so bad. But then with time, we create first a dictionary between the engineers and the scientists, because we could say the same thing, the same words, and they wouldn't mean the same thing. And it could be disastrous during a mission. So we learned that, how to work with a rover. And other rovers came. Curiosity is fantastic. And Perseverance is carrying, the torch a little further too. But the basic of how you handle operations with a rover, it happened at that time. And that just, that will stay one of the highlights of my career.
I love that so much. I think a lot of people don't really think that often about the importance of how we speak to each other across disciplines, and even from science to engineering, or even other fields like philosophy and business and law and art. It's important that we have a way of communicating about our things that we're working through together in various fields, and have different voices and different kinds of knowledge coming together, but also understanding that we need some basic level of communication. That kind of, also applies to trying to communicate to aliens one day who might speak, radically different ways of having some kind of communication strategies.
They speak at all.
Yeah, if they speak at all. Yeah, it could be like, shining lights, and maybe they have patterns of light reception and things like that. There's a lot of possible things that alien life could do. And we'll definitely talk about some more advanced alien life topics. I do want to know, just since you were so involved with Spirit, what do you think was, like, if you had to say, like, the one key finding from the Spirit rover, what do you think is, like, the coolest or the most important finding we had from that mission?
So, looking back, because it's something to say there was this cool thing that we found one day, and then looking back at the mission, what was the greater knowledge? I think that there were a couple of them. First, Spirit was the landing site where we first found the carbonate outcrops. We had been finding them from orbit, and we didn't understand why there were so few about them. But Comanche was really the first carbonate outcrop that we could see on Mars. So that was very meaningful for the story about water on Mars, etc. And looking back, I'd say that having all the elements of habitability present in one place at one time, and demonstrating without a shadow of the doubt that Mars was habitable 3.7 billion years ago. This is probably, by many means, Opportunity got a lot of the press releases, because she really fell into it. There were traces of water, but really meaningful finds were made at Spirit. The funny one was this serendipitous discovery we made because we lost a wheel. We didn't lose the wheel, but it was not working. Mm. And so we were dragging it and pretty much digging a trench as we were going. And the first day we look back, we see this very white, line behind us. And we discover that these are salts. And there were geysers on Mars and fumaroles and bingo, a big evidence that you had habitable environments on Mars.
I kind of figured you might mention the fumarolic deposits, because that's one of my favorites as well from that mission. I think for a lot of us too, was just, and serendipity is very important. We send these missions and we're getting better and better from, like you said, Pathfinder to Spirit and Opportunity, now to Curiosity and Perseverance, and the next generation, whatever that's going to be, that we'll be sending to Mars. Our technology is getting better. Our instruments are getting better all the time. We're learning more, but it's still so crucial to also have serendipity and to be ready to find new things in the environment. And your own research has transitioned over the years, but you've still been very kind of involved in this realm of understanding Mars and other worlds and their ancient watery environments, things like lakes, for instance. You've done a lot of work on ancient lakes on Mars, and then also analogous systems here on Earth. And I wonder, for our audience, if you can make the connection for our audience of why it's important to go out into the environment here on Earth and study things like lakes that are analogous to ancient lakes on Mars in the realm of astrobiology and planetary science.
Well, we go to Mars and to other planets whenever we can, but preparing missions takes a long time. And then you have to reflect on what is it that you want to do and the kind of payload you want to put on those missions, because, well, you have so much time to solve the questions that you want to solve. So a good way of doing this is to go to what we call planetary analogs here on Earth. And so you then choose the places that present, some similarities to the environments that you want to explore, and figure out how to respond to your questions in those places. So for me, it was pretty obvious when I started working on Gusev and when I was involved with the Mars exploration team. Remember, all of these things happened for me at about the same time. So for most of the year, I was working on Spirit. And for 1 month in the year, I was climbing volcanoes in the Andes and explore some of those lakes on top to figure out what life could have been looking, at Gusev or in places similar to that on Mars. So it was very dynamic. And the reason you explore lakes in the first place, whether it's in the Andes or elsewhere, is because they are great places to actually understand how life interacts with its environment, what kind of evidence it's going to leave of that interaction. But also, when you have organisms that die, they fall at the bottom of those lakes, and they are really quickly buried under other new sediment that creates an anoxic environment. So that means without oxygen, and that prevents the organic matter from decaying. So basically, you are making fossils. That helps, the process of making fossils. And here I'm talking about physical fossils, but you can have different type of fossils. You can have chemical fossils. We can have, a number of other things. But that was the rationale for me to go and find a place on Earth where I could find conditions that were reminiscent of what Mars was 3.7 billion years ago. And so why the Andes? Because as you go higher up, your short UV radiation is going to get worse and worse. I mean, from the standpoint of, humans. And so there was that, the fact that it's an extremely dry environment where we are going, the fact that it's a volcanic and hydrothermal environment, which is basically what Earth and Mars were looking like when they started off. And also because climate change is acting very fast over there, which means that we have lots of evaporation. Things are changing really, really fast. And you see lakes decreasing, the size of the lakes decreasing year after year. And after a while, they got separated. You have two, lakes, and you see how the local condition is actually impacting the life. Within a few years, you have different communities, you have different signatures, and then you can learn about biodiversity in a different way. So we went to the Andes, and I continue going over there. We are climbing very high volcano, around 6,000 meter high, which is about 20,000 feet. And then once you're up there, you have to dive in those lakes. They are freshwater lakes or salty lakes, that depends, and try to figure things out. So I have to say it's a lot of fun in addition to us learning a lot of things.
I love that connection made too of how the lakes can be separated, and that segregation of the waters can also cause communities to change. It's like island biogeography that maybe a first year ecology student would learn of how islands, cause differentiation of species as they spread across islands, like Darwin's
Exactly.
finches. The same thing can happen in lakes or across communities in places where humans build highways, breaking apart communities and things like that. And so it's important for us to understand how life can be diverged by having these separations and things like that. And I'm glad you brought up the lakes as well, since we did ask our audience before the show. We put out, usually have a poll question. This time we just asked an open-ended question, asking, since some people have listened to you on other podcasts and seen your TED Talk and other things like this, we asked what the world records were that you had unknowingly set during a scientific expedition in Chile and going up these high elevation mountains. Of course, I think many people now are well aware that you did break several records for diving and scuba diving at elevation. I wonder if you can just share, the experience with us of diving at elevation and what that feels like when you're in such a remote and intriguing environment. And also, you've already climbed a mountain. Like you're super high in elevation in a remote environment that's already testing you enough. And now you're diving down underwater in this environment. Just to share with our audience what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, it is a wonderful experience. It also probably, I wouldn't say the closest, but maybe it offers some analogy to what astronauts could feel on a different world. So much so that Scott Parazynski, who is a 6-time astronaut at NASA with lots of EVA experience, actually came with us and was allowed to follow us by NASA because they felt that this kind of isolation and relying on teamwork on each other was very analogous to what astronauts needed to, to prepare themselves to one day go to Mars. So you have to bring all of your equipment up the mountain. And of course, we have help, local help as well to do that. But still, you have to get your equipment out there, which makes it really, I'm so grateful that we were able to connect first with the U.S. military, but also with Dominique Soumian, who was the expedition chief diver for Jacques Cousteau, which was another dream of mine becoming a reality that time. Because then they outfitted us with the Navy SEAL rebreather. And so think about a little bag that's about yay big and an oxygen tank that's about that big. And in terms of weight, it's ideal because the last thing you want is to bring those big cylinders of oxygen or gas. And what they did too was try to figure out diving tables at those altitudes. And so that went on for a while until they decided that they had enough of scratching their heads and said, you know what? We're going to put you on oxygen. This way that will solve a few problems. We don't know what gas is going to do at this elevation. But when you are at high elevation, what the brain needs more is oxygen. So, okay, we were on pure oxygen on this rebreather, but then somebody on the panel, the review panel said, yeah, but when they get out of that, they are still going to have to breathe again in an atmosphere that's 48% of that at sea level. They are going to pass out on us. So what do we do? Well, guess what? They gave us more oxygen. I can tell you how, that ended, but it's a unique experience. First, we trained for 4 or 5 months at the NASA Ames swimming pool. I was joking and said to people, you had to put a telephone line for me at the bottom of the pool because this is where I spend most of my time. But we learned, we developed also some technique to go down. Because we were on rebreathers, they couldn't see any bubbles, obviously. So there was a safety issue from the people on the shore. They wanted to know where we were. So we got this system of inflatable things, those donut inflatable things. And then we tied up a rope. We had a GPS on top. And this was tied to our lead belt, which means that whenever we were moving, they were seeing where we were. So we get to the summit of the lake. The first day we did a bathymetric map of the lake so that we could see where we were going to do our traverse, like the little rover, what you want to explore. And then the second day we did a first dive. And then you have to imagine, for me, that was the most incredible thing because I am a free diver, by nature. And then all of a sudden, I have this dry suit on me and I have a lead belt that's about 40% of my weight just because the water is so cold that I have clothes underneath. So I feel like a whale, which is the opposite of free diving, as you know, and I'm on shore. And then the person was helping me puts the mask on me. And that's the first time in my life that I really want to run away and not do what I'm going to do because it feels extremely claustrophobic. And in the background, we have our master diver who start the countdown. And you hear like, okay, checklist, go, go, go. And then the countdown. And then you say, oh my God, I am on a rocket or am I going to dive? And this. It was so similar. And then we went in the water. I felt still uncomfortable. I could feel the lead for a little while. And then guess what? Within 10 minutes of doing this, I spotted this white stuff on a rock that was totally out of place, or I felt was. And I forgot everything about the lead, about the dry suit, about the, being claustrophobic. And I started to explore, and we started sampling, and we started doing all the things we had rehearsed. They came as second nature. And the next day was a lot more comfortable for me because we were taking turn. We're a team of three. That second day, I was the videographer. So I had a lot of time on my own in that, like, to enjoy really, the environment and literally became one with the water. It was an incredible moment where you are becoming, in fact, the thing that you are trying to understand.
I love that. And it sounds like it's a lot of work too. I think for people to understand that, the amount of physical exertion that comes into field work, the things that people need to learn for training going into field work, from exploring polar and Antarctic environments, and deserts and high elevation extremes. There's so much that scientists have to learn. And I will say, when we were prepping for the show, and I'd spoken to you earlier, you'd said this idea that, like, I need samples. When you think about, the challenge of getting to these environments is that we as scientists want samples. And it made me think last night, as I was thinking for the show, it reminded me of Sigourney Weaver's character in the movie Avatar, where, like, she gets taken, in her final moments into this unique environment, and the last thing that she thinks to herself is, I need some samples. Like, she wants to know what this environment is. And so, just for a slight, tangent, I wonder how you view the representation of scientists in film and other media, and this idea of, the things that we go through to get samples. Do you think we've done a good job, or are we still lacking in how we show scientists in media?
That would very much depend on the movie. Some are really bad, some are really good. But what I think that is something that the public generally does not associate with scientists. The first image of a scientist is somebody in the lab with a white coat. And especially in astrobiology, and I mean, we need that too. I mean, this is part of science. There is a point where you bring the samples in the lab, and we need to have this expertise to do that. But before you get to that point, I think that people don't understand really exactly what it takes to go get those samples. For us, for my team, that was 4 months in the swimming pool, training every single day. And then that was just if we were capable of making it on top of that mountain. So when we were chatting, I was telling you, very often we trained as professional athletes. And this is one side of science that is very rarely talked about. You are going from sea level to 20,000 feet. Okay, we don't do that at once. We are also trained at acclimatizing, but you still have to be well enough in an environment that is out there to kill you. You cannot survive at 6,000 meter elevation. You will last for some time, but ultimately you will die because the human body is not adapted to that. But so you have to wear your mountaineering gear and climb with your, backpack. So climb that mountain. Once you are there, you have to change into the diving gears. And then, it's just the starting point. Climbing the mountain is not optional. You have to do it. So it is a lot of physical work. At the same time, it's a wonderful adventure, this adventure of discovery. What I found over the years, it's also a absolutely wonderful human adventure. All of these people I've been climbing those mountains, I'm still climbing those mountains with, are family to me. I've become the godmother to some of the kids. I can tell you we have a second generation ready to, take the torch. And all of this, I know all their children, etc. This is also why when things are a little dicey, then, you start thinking a little different because extreme environments are dangerous. And this is another aspect. We're not loose cannons. And I can tell you that NASA is doing a real good job at keeping us safe with the review of our plans for exploration. I ought to the NASA review panel, and I think I might be a little responsible for that review panels over the years, of always bringing back everybody safe and everybody in good health, and this is so important. But what we are doing can be dangerous. The only thing that we have to know is the type of danger we're exposed to. They are the danger that, one, you don't want to be stupid. So this is really off the hook in your safety plan. Then there are the things that, well, they might happen. And this is how you deal with them when they happen. Like all of a sudden, you don't know why you get altitude sickness. That's nobody's fault. It happens. Or how to react when you sprain an ankle or something like that happen. And then there are what we call the acts of God. And this is where, you take the responsibility individually to agree and do with this because you think that the knowledge that you're going to bring back is worth the risk. And the risk is remote, except when it all blows up at the same time one day on top of a volcano, but that's a different story.
That's awesome. Now, I understand that you were also faced an earthquake when you were studying at high elevation.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that adds in so much more, right?
Like gods that are not supposed to happen
if the ground starts shaking. I mean, like, how can you react? I faced the same thing myself when we were in the Arctic and we were doing some research on a glacier, and the glacier started shaking, and the next thing we knew, there was a giant wall of ice and water coming towards us, and the best we could do in the moment was react the way we'd trained to, is to run away from that and get to a high spot where we could be safe. So that adds a lot more into this idea of fieldwork and the challenge that you face as well.
Yeah, and you actually mentioned the key word, which is training. As I said, we are not loose cannon; we are trained people. Again, I will put this as a feather on the cap of NASA, which is that they care about their scientists as the same as they are caring about their astronauts. I can remember, sometime a little frustrated by what all review panels entail, what it is, you have to review your plan, etc. But we are still here, we're still healthy. And those acts of God that can rarely happen, when you are in the Andes, they have a slightly higher chance to happen than anywhere else. The Andes is this one part of the world where you have the largest magnitude earthquakes. People don't start, really worrying about earthquakes in Chile until they are around 7. That tells you really what it's all about, because you have those plates that are moving all the time. And then the Andes are very active volcanic chains of volcanoes. So it's a long story, but in a nutshell, I was 50 meters away from getting to the summit of our crater. And then I have our guide in front of us. We are just under an overhanging, lava towering thing. And our guide just asked us to move away from that. So I didn't discuss, because we've known each other for 10 years. He was a good friend. And then he asked me to come and hands me the radio. And then I have my chief logistics officer at the foot of the volcano. He's frantic on the radio and said, "Nathalie, we are having a huge earthquake." And I'm like, "What?" I was not feeling anything where we were. And what he saw from his viewpoint was everything was collapsing. Everything was avalanching in the altiplano all around, including the volcano we were on. For I don't know what reason, we are probably in the most dangerous place in the volcano, right next to the central gully. Nothing was moving where we were. And I said, "Well, listen, we are 50 meters away from the summit. I'm taking everybody in the crater this way. We won't really have a problem with the avalanches." And then I asked him to monitor the situation. He called me a few times back, and he said that the one thing that got my attention when he said, "Nathalie, I think that Lascar is erupting." So we were on that volcano. The Lascar volcano has a joint slope to it. It's just slightly lower, which means that if that thing blows up, there is really nowhere you can go. The only thing that's protecting you is because you are on the opposite side. So that got my attention. But until that moment, of course, and I think I mentioned that to you, we are waiting because I was waiting for the aftershock and I didn't want an avalanche on us when we were going down. Well, my crew actually did what they came to do, which is sampling. So we did all the sampling, but then when he told me that there was a danger that the other volcano could erupt, and more importantly, that there was now a plume of gas that was not vapor anymore, water vapor anymore, but was yellow. I said, we're out of here because you can see the rocks, but you can't see the gas. And then you have to compute in your mind what is going to kill you first. This is where your training is kicking in. So we are lucky. We run downhill pretty fast, so put some good distance. The cloud came over the summit, so we did the right thing. We didn't have an avalanche. The only thing that happened was us going down, and I probably had my teammate kicking a rock while going down. And then I hear, Nat, rock. I turn around and I just, dove on the side. And then there is this like football size block rolling down. And you know what, Graham? At that time, I lost it. This is when I got mad. And I started yelling at that mountain. That didn't last. We got everybody down and the rest is history. But yeah, training. That day, it was all about adrenaline. And it was about, what did you learn? And it was right there.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's understandable to have a moment of anger at the physical environment causing this.
I was so pissed.
Yeah.
I threw my paws on the ground and I just started insulting that mountain.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, I don't know, maybe I was venting on my own. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I love it. I do want to get soon to our faster than light segment, so we can also get to our audience questions that are coming in. Before we get there, though, I do have one more question for myself. Now, your new book, The Secret Life of the Universe, does a really kind of fun job exploring a lot of the facets of astrobiology, from the origins of life and missions we've had in our solar system, exploring Venus and Mars and ocean worlds, and then looking at exoplanets, and then going into some more advanced topics in SETI. And then your epilogue, Time as a Cosmic Mirror, and kind of like this larger vision of what we're seeing in astrobiology, considering, our interstellar future, or at least potential. You mentioned Carl Sagan's quote there about, becoming cartographers of human purpose. In my own work, in my TED Talk I gave fairly recently about the Panzoic effect, this idea that astrobiology inspires people to think bigger about the universe and their place in it. I wonder, before we get to our Faster Than Light segment, if you can just share with us like your own vision for how this realm right now of astrobiology is impacting what it means for us to be human and consider our place in the universe.
Yeah. And there are two facets of it, which, they are the same, but you can sort of, look at this differently. The first one, obviously, is our place in the universe. But what I'd like to emphasize a little bit more here is about how astrobiology serves as a mirror to teach us our place on Earth here. You have these big concepts that astrobiology teaches us, and they are, what is habitability? What are the thresholds of habitability? How do you keep a planet habitable? How do you lose habitability? I think that this is so highly relevant today, in understanding what are all the processes at play, because we are searching for life with astrobiology, right? But we're not just looking for life. What we're searching for is really a coevolution of life and environment. And we had that discussion, life did not appear with a magic wand at the surface of the Earth. Planetary bodies, they come with the stuff of life embedded in them. I don't think that we have found any asteroids or comets without the bricks of life in them, and so it's embedded in them. And on Earth, life emerged what I think we're seeing today in astrobiology too is, this separation with the idea that life is a thing. Probably life is a process, and it's also a transition from that moment where you see a planet and something that you can recognize as life. And now we are wondering a lot more, if it's a transition, where do you put the limit? Does this even make a sense? So we are on the spectrum of looking at life in a very different way, but also looking at how not separated life is from its environment. It is a coevolution, and that teaches us a lot about biogeological cycles, how every single action that we do, every single one of us is impacting that, cycle. So to me, it's this beautiful mirror. We can, we learn about the potential for others, but we are also looking at, humans, but also the biosphere, and just replacing us. It's a different revolution than the Copernican revolution, but at the same time, it is about the same thing, which is decentralization of the position of human as being special and unique. The Earth is not the center of the universe. The Earth actually goes around the sun, not the other way around. We've learned that a long time ago. And then all of a sudden we learn that there are many other planetary systems. So we keep, becoming, I would say, less alone, still unique at this point in time, but not necessarily alone. And we are also now learning that humans are not the center of what makes this Earth. They are a component of it. And if you are looking at the way where trophic levels, where, the ecosystem, how it is layered, if you remove humans from this, I can bet you will have a number of species that are going to be really happy about this. I mean, this is a house of cards. If you remove the top card, the house might not look so nice, but it still stands. If you are removing the tiny guys, blue-green algae, plants, the primary producers, then the whole thing collapses. And so I think that it is the spotlight that we are shining, on what it is to be human. We're not bad, we're just learning, but we need to learn fast, and we are part of a wonderful thing. So this is really, both a message of becoming responsible, but also a very hopeful message, because the lessons are everywhere. Astrobiology shows you those lessons embodied by those planets everywhere. Venus has become too hot, runaway effect. This is what happens when a planet becomes too hot. Mars has lost its water. Okay. And on Earth, we are lucky to be just right for now, and look at what we learn and what the thresholds are. So yeah, that was kind of the message out there.
Yeah, I love that. And I could talk more on that for a very long time, but I do have a bunch of audience questions to get to. So first, I'm going to move to our Faster Than Light segment. We have a few standard questions we ask everyone to try to help us all kind of get a bearing of what it means to be an astrobiologist and ask these kinds of questions. The first is a favorite of mine. What is your favorite thing that life on Earth does?
We talked about that. I think that just the fact that life is the most amazing thing, and for now, although we have many candidates, it's just us. I mean, our biosphere. It's not just us humans. It's our biosphere that we recognize as life. That's it. But can you imagine that thing we call life, I come to a level of consciousness where it can ask those questions and literally set the sail to explore them? I find this extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about, a conscious experience and communication with others. If you could communicate with any non-human organism on Earth, what would it be and what would you want to talk about?
Oh, that's a good one. I have fantasy about discussing with ET, but basically you are asking me here on Earth. So, well, I'd love to talk to cats. And no, seriously, because, they are their own persons. They are acting like they own the place. They are, any place, just like us. That's why I'd like to talk to them to understand a little bit more what's going on here. They care when they want to care, when it's convenient for them to do so, and they couldn't care less most of the time. As I said, just like us, So I'd really like to pick their brain. I'd like to ask them their vision about our planet. Do they have an understanding that there is a planet or not? That could be an interesting question to ask them if they have such a notion. And what do they think about the moon in the sky? Do they have any thoughts about life and death? Something light.
Yeah, I love that. I love that kind of jokey idea that like humans domesticated dogs, but cats domesticated humans, and they figured out how to manage their way around us. I love that so much. Now I have to pick out your background just for a moment. I love the image kind of showing, it's kind of like reminiscent of Larry Niven's Ring World, but also the Halo series of video games. And I myself have been a big fan of science fiction, inspired by a lot of those kinds of stories of sci-fi. I wonder for you, what stories have inspired you to want to know more about life in the universe?
Interestingly enough, that might shock a number of people, but I'm not so much of a sci-fi fan. And I try to understand why. There are a few, there are the exceptions, obviously. Arthur Clarke is definitely one of those. But as far as exploration and getting my imagination going when I was a kid, that was Jules Verne's. Obviously, I was born in France, but Voyage to the Center of the Earth really was something that, inspired me. But it's, I think it's not really one story. It's more about people for me, seeing passion and the big questions.
Love that. Yeah, and it's okay not to be a sci-fi fan. I'm not going to judge too much.
And you know why? And just to finish the thought is because I think that what we are doing, we are writing sci-fi and making it real every single day.
I love that. Yeah, we're writing our own future, and that includes a lot of issues along the way, trials and tribulations created by nature for us and us for nature. But there's a lot to consider about where our future is going and where we've told ourselves stories in various realms of what we're building right now. And so I wonder for you, what is something that excites you about the future?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, what excites me the most is that I think that we are at the threshold of a new revolution in science. In fact, I think that this revolution has been underway for a couple of decades, but it seems to be converging more right now. And it's centered around what seems almost like being a buzzword word these days, which is quantum. You hear quantum everything. But what really is drawing my attention is about how quantum physics has the potential to completely reshape not only physics, but also the way we see the universe and our relationship with it. You have neuroscientists, you have biologists and quantum physicists working often together and redefining our idea of what a particle is, our connection with the universe, and the fact that we might not be separated at all, with what we call the universe, we consider always outside of us. Right now, you have some neuroscientists working with some astrobiologists and biologists as well, that are starting to even push back on the idea that consciousness is a function of the brain and that it might be more of a universal principle. When you add to that some other researchers in astrobiology, biophysicists, are working on the nature of life more than the origin of life, and looking at life potentially as being the inevitable result of thermodynamics, because it's the best way to beat entropy. So when you're taking all of things together, right now it's still a little bit fuzzy. A lot of it needs to be verified or falsified, But if this pathway that we're seeing now actually come to be, then the universe we are looking at and how we look at this universe, in particular, just redefining what reality means. Remember, for scientists, understanding nature goes with measuring reality. So if reality is totally different to what we think, so what do we do? So I think it's not a small revolution. We're looking at something really big and real fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and it is the International Year of Quantum this year. There's so much going on in the realm of quantum technologies. I have a friend here locally who works at Atom, and they're shipping out qubits left and right now. Yeah. There's a lot more quantum computing going on. It's going to help us, along with AI, to solve some really big problems, to explore really big data sets and understand medicine, transcriptomics, genomics, all kinds of things. And so, the future really is changing, and it's changing very fast. Now, I will say, for the sake of our audience, we have a lot of really incredible questions coming in. So I have one more question of my own, and then we'll get to the audience questions, since there are some incredible ones coming. But for our audience, keep asking, and I'll try my best to get to as many as I can then. But for my final question, Nathalie, what's an unbelievable science fact that still blows your mind?
We touched on that too. For me, the fact that most of our universe is invisible to us. If the theory around dark matter is true, we still have to verify that too, right? We see some weird effect, gravitational effect, but if they're right, almost 90% of the universe is invisible to us. And I would really love to know what it looks like if I had, some instruments to see the universe, because it's so beautiful. What we see in the universe is so beautiful, right now. So this is something that really, really boggles my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have to move to audience questions for the sake of time here. There's so much more we could talk about with intelligence and consciousness and the universe and astrobiology, but our audience have some incredible questions that jump through a bunch of different topics here. I want to start off with a question from AC. First off, hi, AC. AC wants to know if you can comment on the recent findings from Perseverance this past year of a rock called Sheva Falls. I think I'm pronouncing that maybe close, where we had, signs of aqueous mineralogy. We had organic molecules and then these leopard spots inside of the rock. AC wants to know if you can comment on the importance of that rock.
Yeah, so, I became a citizen when it comes to the exploration of Mars, so I am, not necessarily so much following in depth, but I saw that particular rock. And again, when you're starting to find all the elements that you think are good for habitability and for life, when they are all in one place, then I think that it tells you what we know. Mars was habitable. But to me, this is a really good rock to sample and to bring back, because then, we can learn about what happened then on Mars. What were the conditions? And do we see any sign that life was there? Is this just the bricks of life they never assembled? Because organic molecules, obviously, we can find them everywhere. Organic molecules are not life, but when you start to assemble aqueous mineralogy, organic molecules, a little farther away, I think we found some also mineral sulfur. You have the environment, you have the energy, etc. We are starting to see the 5 ingredients we think are good for life to be there. So to me, that calls in, get that rock back to Earth and let's see what's in there.
Yeah, fantastic. So in this realm, like say we do bring a sample back from Mars, what happens if we find life inside of it? So Danny Husseini wants to know what the implications might be if we find, say, microbes or life in our solar system.
Okay, that's such a great question. And the first, there are two main responses here. The first one is congratulations. You found life in the second planet of a system of 8. That's 25%. All of a sudden, your vision of, the abundance and distribution of life in the universe just, took a really big boost. For me as well, looking at the other spectrum of life, extraterrestrial life, nature follows pattern. And it does a lot more small things than big things and simple things than complex things. So the more I'm finding microbial life somewhere, the more chances I have to find an advanced civilization somewhere else. That's the one first consideration. The second one is the ethical aspect of things. And people are still debating around those questions. And if you find life on Mars, even if they are microbes, well, this is their planet. So should we fence Mars and put it, out of reach for humans? Do we respect their planet as being theirs? If you look at human history and exploration, that didn't go so well for the so-called discovered people. By the way, I resent all of this phrasing because people are not discovered; they were there. We are exploring. Ultimately, if you look at the history of human exploration, I think that there are a number of points of view that don't really care about if they are microbes. If they were people, that might be different depending on the size of their guns. But I would say, and I'm being provocative, on purpose here, is that certainly Mars is being perceived as the closest planet for human to learn to be an interplanetary species. To me, so we know those issues. They are still being debated, and I don't have the immediate answer. To me, I think, a twist on that question, which is, when do we pull the plug on the search for life on Mars? When do we decide that we didn't find life on Mars? Because obviously we don't have a definition for life. We have 142 definitions for life, one more every single day. So we don't really know what life is. That makes it a little difficult to recognize it. But when do we decide that, it's good for us to go and we didn't find anything? I mean, the negative hypothesis is always the most difficult in science.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's a hard question. Like, when do we say it's okay, we can do whatever we want on Mars? And will we say that, well, with human exploration, for instance, or making industrial civilization on Mars in the future, and what that means for a potential Martian biosphere, wherever it may be? I do have to ask real quick, do you have time for maybe 2 more questions?
Yes, just a real quick thing that I wanted to say was that, we want to make sure that there is no life there before life finds us.
It's a big question, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it might just be that, there might be microbes on Earth and we decide to go without doing the right job at trying to figure out if there is something out there before we send humans. And then maybe, we have two microbiomes interacting with each other, and maybe Martian life is going to find the human life before we find them. That's a consideration we don't talk so much about.
Yeah, absolutely. For better or for worse as well. I do want to jump to a question from Felipe Benitez because it is a fun one. First off, hi, Felipe. Felipe asks if you can talk about SETI research in life in extreme environments. And this is kind of fun. He says, we always think of using SETI, or we always think of SETI using telescopes, but what about SETI with microscopes?
Yeah, well, we are doing SETI with microscopes, but what he's probably referring to is the reverse of the Kardashev scale. We have the Kardashev scale that goes with more and more technology, etc. But there is a reverse scale that is less known about this. And for right now, the name escapes me. But somebody's saying that a very advanced civilization might have, in fact, mastered particles and the use of particles. So people have thought about it. And there are so many ways we can look, for ET. And I'm going to tell something else. quantum physics is another way we can look into this, where maybe you don't search for ET with radio telescopes and you just start in looking at how your particles around you behave.
I love that. Yeah, like quantum super connections between molecules in the universe. And maybe they're already looking through the universe with
It's
an
probably
advanced
all around
form
us, and we
of
just don't know how
telescopy.
to decode that.
I love that so much. We are at the top of the hour, so I'll ask one more question. For our audience, there's so many great questions here from the chat. Thank you all so much. Please reach out to myself, reach out online, and we'll try our best to answer all of your questions about astrobiology. And you can always join us in our future episodes as well. I think this one will be kind of fun to finish with, from battery included. So Nathalie, if you had unlimited funding, what kind of project or mission would you want to create?
Wow. I think that I'd like to create a mission that will be a mission to planet Earth, where we understand the connection between life and its planet. That will be where I would put my funding. Because once we understand that, then that opens so many different ways to look for life out there. We understand the main principle of this connection of the life environment process. And, so while you are learning about your planet, you are learning about other coevolution somewhere else. So this is where I would put my money.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, there's so much more to know about our place in the universe and this biosphere we've been inhabiting for some time, but life has been here way, way longer than we have. And so there's certainly so much more for us to explore. So with that, Nathalie, thank you so much for joining us for Ask an Astrobiologist. It's been a blast having you.
Thank you for having me, Graham. That was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. To our audience, thank you. You have remarkable questions, lots of great stuff out there. As always, please reach out to us. We all love chatting about our work in astrobiology and all the other things that we do. For those who want to stay in the loop on what NASA Astrobiology is doing, you can join up on our mailing list to get all of the cool emails from NASA Astrobiology about Ask an Astrobiologist, about educational resources, about upcoming events, about launch opportunities, and all kinds of other cool things that are going on from across the realm in astrobiology. To our guest, Dr. Nathalie Cabrol, thank you so much for joining us. To our audience, thank you so much for tuning in, asking your awesome questions, and being part of this journey. And to all of you watching the video anytime in the future, thank you for joining. And until next time, as always, stay curious.